Hey everyone, today I'm going to be going through and showing you a recent painting that I did. I use a Faber-Castell water cup to clean my brushes. I use some Strathmore palette paper. I use Hemi brushes that I got off of Amazon. And then I use some Arteco Fine Detail brushes that I also got from Amazon. As you can see, I already taped down and I already stretched my paper. However, I'm going to go ahead and say that I would not use this tape. It is the Artist Loft painter's masking tape. I find that no matter what paper that I use to paint, it peels off the paper, and it can kind of be disastrous sometimes if it doesn't tear the paper. Sometimes it just tears it completely in half, which is awful and not something that you want to use. So I'm not going to be leaking that. And I go in with an extremely watered down dark blue first. And then I go in with a more of a rich blue, not as neutral of a blue, but I'm just going in with a deeper blue color. And keeping that water nice and wet. And now I decided that I didn't necessarily like how neutral the background initially was, so I went in with a kind of, it's a little bit less colorful than the last blue that I went in with, but it's still less gray than the one I initially went down with. And now I'm going in with a dark blue for the road. Also making sure that's very watery. And I am waiting between layers so that they can fully dry before I go on with another layer of paint, because I don't want any of the previous colors to smear. And I typically always try to work from the thinnest layer up to the thickest as I go in, because with gouache, it is a paint that can be re-wetted and can be repurposed. So if you try to go in with thin on thick, it will just completely ruin those under layers if they are thicker than the layer that you were trying to go on top of currently. And now I'm trying to go in and create some kind of, a little bit of some darker cloud cover in the background, because the picture that I'm originally working off of for this as the inspiration does have some dark clouds in the sky. And I'm going in with a dark blue for the road. And just taking some generic black, I go in and do the outline, sort of the outer ridge of the road, and I start to go in and fill in where the tree line will be. Also, here is a prime example of me not waiting long enough for the layers to dry in between, because as you can see, the black is bleeding into the blue of the road, which is not what I wanted. So now that layer is pretty much completely dry, and you can see that a lot of the black of the tree line that I went in did not hold up because it blended in with the background, which is, it's an easy fix. I can just go over the thicker layer of black paint. There is a small mountain in the background of the picture that this is based off of, but it's pretty far off in the distance and it is pretty foggy. So I go in with a dark blue, and around the edges I just wet my brush and brush over that and wait for that to dry. And while I'm waiting for that to dry, I go in and just refine the edges of the black land mass at the edge of the road. Now I'm just going on the other side of the road and again refining that black, and I'm just going in and filling out the basic shape of what the tree line is going to look like. And then while those black layers are drying, I go in again with a more rich, less watered down dark blue for the road. And I'm just taking some black and I am going in onto the road, and I'm adding some of those more dark and wet spots where the road is more deep than I guess the rest of the cement, so where cars would be traveling on more often. And then I go in and I just wet my brush with some water, and I sort of blot those dark areas out to make them blend in more with the road. Just going back and forth. And then I start to take a small brush and go in and make the general shape of the tree that's next to the road that kind of overhangs it a little. And I keep the black on this pretty watered down because I want the trees to kind of blend in but not too much, because if I were to just go in with just straight black, it would stand out, you know, starkly against the background, but to the point where it would look unnatural. So you can see now that I have that nice kind of a gradient between the outer tree line and the sky. This whole process took me about an hour and a half, and I just did this in one night. And now I take one of my fine detailed brushes and I get it pretty saturated with black, and I just add some of the leaf shapes onto the edge, and going with that same black, not really watering it down, I add some of the more finely detailed dark patches on the road. Please excuse my kind of disgusting nails, I'm redoing them soon. I didn't think that my tree looked beefy enough, so I went in and I added some more leaves. And now I go in with a smaller, more horse bristled brush, and I just go in and do the very general shapes of the pine trees that I want in the background. Also making sure it's kind of watery so that it still has some texture of that, you know, pine tree type of a look. And I mixed black with a deep kind of a turquoise tone to get this sort of a stormy blackish gray color. And I'm just letting this layer dry. As you can see, some of the tape started to come off, so I had to reflatten it. Just another reason why to not use this tape. And I'm just darkening up that ridge underneath the lighter blackish green trees, just because I noticed a little bit of a gradient that I didn't necessarily want. And I noticed that the mountains were too low. Then I went in with that deep kind of a teal color that I used to mix with the black for the trees, just to make that mountain stand out. And then with one of my detailed brushes, I take some black and I just go in and start adding the finer details, using a stippling motion mostly. And now I'm starting to do the car. And I'm not really good at painting cars, and in the original image the car is a lot smaller than what I'm painting it. so I kind of struggled. I had to go back and forth with this quite a bit. I am using a detailed brush for this. As you can see, I went over the window because I didn't like it, so I just take a few seconds to examine the photo before I go in and try again. And that's one thing that's so important in art, is if you don't think that something looks the way it's supposed to, you can always go back and retry again, or you can work with it, you can make something new out of that little mistake. Art is subjective. You're supposed to enjoy doing it. I went in with a bright reddish tone for one of the tail lights because the other isn't reflected in the original image. I use the same tone of red for the taillights, and I just take a streak of orange and just run it over on top of that original red streak on the road. And then I go in with that same orangish yellow color that I put on the road for the taillights. And then I just go in and start cleaning up my space, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Go ahead and start to peel off the tape, and again, as you can see, it did not keep the paint off of the borders, unfortunately. Again, another reason why to not use this tape. As you can see, it's ripping. And that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching, and if you want to see more or have any suggestions, feel free to go ahead and drop them below. I'll see you guys later.